next training session of Ask the Broncolor Assistant. My name is Blake Griffin. I am the product manager here, brand manager for Broncolor here in the US. If this is your first time joining us, thank you. If it is not your first time joining us, welcome back. We're happy to have you. So following on the trend that we were doing last month, if you joined us then, we're going to be doing things a little bit different this time. I actually have some really special stuff that we're going to share today. But before we get into that, please, if you have not already, make sure that you like, follow, share, subscribe, all the things at Broncolor USA. This is definitely going to be a video that you're going to want to rewatch and replay because we are going to be going over a lot of information today. So be sure to keep an eye out on our YouTube page for that. Let's get going here because we've got a lot to cover. I'm going to go ahead and introduce today our guest, Francis Westfield. Francis is a longtime photo assistant and digital technician to many legendary New York City photographers. He estimates that he's been on over 4,000 pro shoot days through his 40 years of the industry, and now is Broncolor's technical sales manager here in the US. And he likes to offer many years of on-set experience to offer quality products and solutions to pro photographers and studios. So without further ado, Francis has joined us there. Welcome, Francis.
Thank you. Hi, Blake. Hi, everybody. Welcome to our Broncolor Assistant training. We're going to do packs and heads today. And what we're doing is we've made this webinar. It was born out of our assistant training that we've been doing over the last year around the country. So if you are in the city that we're going to do this in, and I think we have one coming up on the West Coast soon. Isn't that right, Blake?
Yes.
We're going to plan one here in New York, and then I think we're going to do one out in Ohio in the fall. We're still getting that all worked out. But if you can make one in person, I think you get a lot out of it. It's only about 4 hours. We try to do it on a Saturday where it's not going to impede on you of working your regular job as a photo assistant or a student. And we try to make it as fun as possible, as hands-on, because that's what we really like to that's what we're trying to emphasize here. A lot of people know of Broncolor, but they've never really worked with it. And that's our goal and objective here, to actually get you hands-on as much as possible. Now, I know that's a little difficult on a webinar, but we're going to do our best today to emphasize that and show you. So, but again, if you can make one live and get on our mailing list, we would love to see you, and you're more than welcome to join us. So I hope you enjoy today, and thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely, Francis. And just for everybody's information, the next one of these that we are going to be doing live is going to be on July 16th at Castex in Los Angeles. The event is limited to 25 people, because we like to keep things a little bit more hands-on and a little bit safer based on everything that's happening in the world today. But if you are not in the West Coast, be sure to check out broncolor.us/upcoming-events. When we do have these events set up, they are listed there first. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and we will launch into our first video segment. As this rolls along, as always, if you have any questions, please ask them in the chat. Use the Q&A button. We're going to be answering questions all through the process. And when we get through our first segment here, we'll have a little bit of live Q&A as well. So without further ado, hope you all enjoy.
So today, let me show you and explain what the differences are on the Scoro packs that we have. This is the Scoro S3200. This is the Scoro S1600. There's simply one difference a one-stop difference in power levels from this smaller pack to this larger pack. In most scenarios that you walk into in rental studios, rental houses, you're going to see the Scoro S3200 as it's the most powerful pack out there. You may run into this, but essentially it works the same. Aside from the two power level packs of the 1600 and the 3200, we make not just the Scoro S, we make the Scoro E. The E is a more economical model. It's got 2 lamp outlets versus 3, and it doesn't have all the bells and whistles or all the controls and features that are available on the S. If you run into that, there's no problem. At the end of this video, I'm going to circle back to that and show you how to work the Scoro E and the menu that it will that we'll give you, because it's a little bit different from the menu on the Scoro S. But don't worry, it's the same power, it's the same great color temperature, it's the same great flash duration. It's just a little bit more of a pared down version of the S. Okay, the first thing today is the safety of these packs. Let me go over the real estate up here on the control, on the top of the pack, and just talk about it a little bit. The Scoro S offers 3 lamp heads. Plug in here, and by the way, that plug can go into anywhere worldwide because it's a self-regulating voltage. If you plug it here in the United States with 120 voltage, it's going to turn on. If you took it over to Europe and plugged it in Switzerland, because these are made in Switzerland, with the right adapter, it's going to power up there. Incidentally, the voltage in Switzerland, which is 240, will make the packs actually recharge just slightly faster. That's something to know. On-off switch, pretty self-explanatory. This is the master display of the power setting. Then each lamp outlet will have its own display of power. I'll show you that in just a minute. And you can turn them on or off via these 3 buttons. Test button, which is pretty self-explanatory. Then we have the speed button, the user button, the reset button, which is only on the S packs, and then the main menu and the controls for the main menu here. Let's start by plugging the pack in. Okay, I'm going to turn it on. Now notice I've turned it on without any lamp outlets plugged in. You get a power level in the master of just 0.1. Essentially it's saying 0. And there's nothing in the 1, 2, or 3 lamp channels. I might say lamp outlet, I might say channel, I might intermix them, so please forgive me if it confuses anybody. I'll turn that off for a second, and then I'm going to plug in one of my heads. So I'm going to turn on, I'm actually going to plug in my Unilight, which is right here, and I'm going to plug that into lamp outlet 1. Now the first thing I'd like to show you is how to plug these in properly. It's a rectangular outlet plug. It's got 20 pins in it, and it has 2 30-degree cuts or corner cuts on this side, where this side is not cut like that. Let me go to this camera and show you. And then it's got a little clip here and a smaller clip on the back section of it. So this only goes in one way, and what we ask you to do is to not just drop these in, you want to dive it in. Turn and angle the plug on a 30-degree angle or so, and then just go into the plug outlet and then clamp down. Okay, the head's on right now. If you can't pull it up like this, it is plugged in properly. Now, I just want to demonstrate this. I'm going to unplug it, plug it into lamp channel 2, and I'm going to unplug it and go back to lamp channel 3. And I'm doing that to show you that the safety that Broncolor puts into the design of these packs and the heads is paramount. We want you to feel completely safe that with electricity equipment like this or electrical equipment like this, you're not going to have any kind of mishaps, accidents, or any kind of arcing. So safety is absolutely paramount. It's the #1 design feature of Broncolor. And I'm going to go back into lamp channel 1. I'm going to plug it in. I'm going to unplug it, and if you happen to plug it in the wrong way, okay, and I'll just demonstrate that by not holding on that angle and plug it in like that, it may appear like it's going to fire and ready to go, but since this clip is not in, and I can wiggle it like that, you will get an error when you go to fire this. The error will give the test button red, it'll blink in the individual indicator of the lamp channel, and it is not going to fire. You'll also get that signal, that error signal as well, audio signal. Just clear it by pressing that, plug it in the right way, and you're good to go. So feel safe when you're working with Broncolor equipment. That's the #1 thing we want to assure you. There's not going to be a problem. Okay, so I'm going to go over and show you first the power distribution of how this works. You may have seen another pack that has a dial on it and goes up a 10th stop. Nothing wrong with that. It's just a little bit different. It's a digital interface with Broncolor, and we work in the f-stop. 6.0 means it's at the level 6, and they call that f-stop levels, if you were to press the master button right here, one at a time, going 5.9, 5.8, 5.7, 6, 5.5, it goes down in 1/10 f-stops or goes up in 1/10 f-stops. Okay? If you're to hold one of those buttons down fully, it'll go down in full stop increments. I'm going to go all the way down to power level 1. Go up. That's power level 1. It's dissipating right now by the blinking of the master power level indicator. So it's showing that any excess power in the capacitors that were built up are going to self-regulate and dissipate themselves. So there's no need in the old days where you used to have to bleed the heads to get rid of the excess power, so that first exposure was overexposed or something like that. Broncolor works the magic inside the pack and it takes care of itself. We can actually even go further down on the 3200, down to power level 0. We can go down further to power level 0.1, which is a very small amount. If you're shooting still life or something like that, and you just need a little kick, you don't have to flood it out with a lot of excess light. And then you go up all the way to power level 10. Okay, power level 10 on this pack is a full 3200 watt seconds that's coming out of here right now. I'm just going to jump to the menu and show you something. That on power level 10, the lamp 1 is 3200 joules. The pack is made in Switzerland and Europe. Joules is the measurement they use over there. It's the same as watt seconds here in the United States. So J, WS, watt seconds, same thing. Okay, just keep that in mind. I'm going to quit out of that because I'm going to come back to the menu in just a little bit. I'm going to bring this down to power level 6 again. And I'm going to try to confuse you. So I apologize in advance. Okay, and you see it's dissipating its power. Not a problem. You can plug in while that's happening. Angle, push into the forward part of the plug receptor, the outlet, and then angle down till it clicks. Okay, so now each 1 and 2 lamp outlet or lamp channel is now at power level 6. Okay, so in the master, what do you think the power level would show you? Would it be 10? Would it be 12? Some people think 6 and 6, it's doubled, it's 12. Actually, it's going to be 7, because one stop more is added to that. Okay? Okay, so I'm going to actually just show you another way in here. I'm going to go back into my main menu, up to the top, and where you have the digital display in the menus, lamp 1 is 200 joules, lamp 2 is 400 joules at power level 6 each. Okay? Since I have 3 outlets available, I'm going to plug one more in. I'm going to cover this up again to try to fool everybody. And I've left that at power level 6. So there are 600 watt seconds coming out of the pack. That means I have 2600 watt seconds left over to use. But what do you think the indicator is going to be here right now? It's going to be 7.5, because I've added one equal amount of power here from one of these. 6 and 6 is 7. Half of that added would give you 1/2 stop of power. So 90% of what you do is going to be in the power distribution here in this pack, and it's an asymmetrical and symmetrical power distribution. I can easily come up everything right now if I had to. Let's say my exposure was half a stop dark. I could come up to that and be at 8.6. Final power would be left over. I'd have a stop and a half more power available to use if I needed to. Okay? But each head can go where it wants to. Let's say the number one head is your beauty dish in a beauty setup, and you need it's just a third stop overexposed. I need to bring it down a little bit. My hair light happens to be the number 2 channel, and it's just too bright. I could bring that down to that. Let's say even more. Let's make it a spaghetti mess here. And let's say this is my background light, and it's just too bright. So I'm going to bring it down to like level 5, or let's say 4, 8. Okay? So this might all look like a mess, but it's actually doing everything working properly. So you're not working on a set to do math calculations, but I just wanted you to have an understanding of how this all works. I have still 3 stops necessary that I can use. Lamp 1 is giving out 246 joules, lamp 2 is giving out a little over 40 joules, and lamp 3 is giving out 87. If I added those all up, I could see exactly how many joules or watt seconds coming out of the pack, out of these 3 heads, and then how much I have left over based on it being a 3200 watt second pack. But in reality, in practicality, you're just going to say, I need a little bit more on this head. I need a little bit less on this one. I need a little bit more on, let's say, if that was my background. And that's what you should really just think about and concentrate on. Don't let this, if you see it first, alarm you or worry you. It's just a digital display on the power distribution of what comes out of there. Each head can be turned off. Let's say if I wanted to just take that beauty dish that I talked about and measure just that, I could easily do that. Let's say I wanted to measure just the hair light. I turn that off and I do that. Or then I just want to measure the background. I'll let it dissipate, even though you can just fire it to go. I'll just measure the hair light or measure the background now. Okay, hope that makes sense. Let's go over some more of the controls before I go any further. Okay, so the cell button is very simple explanation. If you had another strobe triggering this, you turn your cell on here. That is the cell eye right there. If you needed to maybe control it from if you're using this outside and the sun was hitting it, that's maybe you want to shade that. IR and RF is the signal that works with a remote like this one here. We'll go into those in depth later. And that has to be on for the remote to actually work. Then the IR is the older legacy infrared remotes that Broncolor had in days gone by. So they still work on these packs today, and you can just activate it by turning that on. Okay? The model light, pretty simple explanation. It turns the model lights on or on here, and when we go into the menu later, I can show you exactly what you can do and further control the model lights by different levels or proportional levels. We have 5 different proportional levels that we can put the model lights to. So, test button, pretty self-explanatory. And then we have the speed, user, and the reset button. Broncolor is all about flash duration and color accuracy. So the color temperature can be controlled independently per pack, and so can the flash duration. Well, I'll go into the menu a little bit and show you that later. But if you have the speed button on, I'd like to show you this first, is that my flash duration right now is 1/575th of a second. Without changing, let's turn them all on. Without changing the power levels, because we all know that to get a faster flash duration, you have to lower your power output, and then you'll get a faster flash duration, or a quicker flash duration. So if 1/575th right now, without changing the power level, we'll bring it up to 810 at this power level. And I'll just demonstrate if I brought everything down, it would be 1/2300th with the speed button on. I'll just test that to get rid of it right away. And if I turn the speed button off, it's going to be slower at 1/1400th of a second. So the speed button's just like a quick way to get a faster flash duration. When you use the speed button, there are 2 things to consider. One, it's going to be a little bit more blue. That's the sacrifice that the speed button is making you. Everything in the pack, the way it generates the power, distributes, and the way it cuts off on certain things. Now, I'm not a scientist, so I'm going to give you a layman's explanation of it. it might just go a little bit blue. That's the sacrifice. And Broncolor recommends that if you have the speed button on, you take another gray balance, especially shooting digital. Okay. Now, I'm going to bring this up to power level 10, as high as I go. And when I hit the speed button, I'd like you to see what happens in the master power distribution window. You lose about a half stop. And that's normal. So if you have this pack on and you can't go up to power level 10, know that your speed button is on, and there's a slight difference in the or sight cutoff. It's because at a certain point when they're cutting off the curve of the flash, it goes to blue. So that's the sacrifice of using the speed button. One, you're going to have to do another gray balance. Two, you're only going to get essentially 2400 watt seconds out of this pack. You're losing about 800 watt seconds. Okay? Hope that makes sense. So I'm going to turn that off. I'm going to go down to and I'm going to go down to 6. Yep. Bring these to 6. Okay, my mistake. Okay, so I'm back to where I was before. Okay, let's go into the main menu of this. Okay, I'll get to the user button and the reset button later, but if I press this button and I have the 35 different menus that I have in here, which starts with Wi-Fi, lamps. If I hold the button down, it goes down by page. If I click, it goes one at a time. Okay, so there are 35 different menus in here. You don't have to know them all, but I'll just give you a brief view on some of them and a more in-depth view of some of them selected. Okay, so we'll start with the model light. I told you before that the model lights can be controlled not only from this button here, which is on, but they can also be controlled right here. So under model light, I would hit select, and I'm just going to bring these up to full model lights right now. And the brightest power on these 300 watts model lights on the Unilight and the Pulsog are coming out at its full power. They were on low before, and then there's proportional, and there's proportional 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, depending on the power level that you're at. Excuse me. These are subjective and used by photographers for what they think. If you have a model that's got, she's just squinting at the model light, you can bring it to a proportional level or to a low level and make her feel comfortable. If you're using still life and you might have one head that's higher in power than another and you want to see that in a contrast ratio, you might use one of the proportional levels, the prop 1, 2, 3, or 4, up to 5. So that is subjective, and that's what you would choose. I'm not going to get really any further into that. When you want to get out of this, you hit the quit button right there, and we can go into the other menus. We've got sequence. This is the flash duration. This is the color temperature where you can control that. Okay? All right. So let's go into the color. I'm going to skip around a little bit. I'm going to go into the color temperature, or I'm sorry, the flash duration. And I went into a little bit of that before. If you hit the reset button once, you go to your main menu, and you're going to see that my T.0.1 is at 1150th, but this is very important. OPT color temperature. OPT stands for optimum. Broncolor and the genius scientists over there in Switzerland make this so when you are at a setting of power distribution that you're coming out with the most optimum color temperature possible. That's what it always wants to give you. However, you have the choice to adjust that accordingly. And if I needed to bring up the color temperature, if I needed to bring up the flash duration to a higher flash duration, I have that ability to go up to here. Based on this power level, I could go to 1/3250th of a second, and that would be T1 MIN, standing for minimum. Okay? It regulates itself. If I come back to my main menu, I just want to point out that the optimum is gone. And that is absolutely normal, because right now it's saying this is on minimum. So I'm getting a faster flash duration than I did before, but I might be sacrificing a little bit in the color. So I would recommend, again, doing another gray balance. So I've shown you how to change your flash duration to minimum from your optimum optimum flash duration. Excuse me, I get those mixed up all the time. I've shown you how to change your flash duration from your optimum to minimum, and that will display in your main menu. Now I'd like to show you just basically how to reset that. So I'm going to jump around a little bit. The reset button here on the Scoro S, it's not on the Scoro E, has 3 resets. One, this one little tap brings you back to the main window. Holding it down 2 seconds should bring you back to optimum color temperature. And this blinking is the pack resetting itself, just like it's dissipating the excess power. Okay, you're ready to go. So I'm at my optimum color temperature of 1100, 1150, and before, with minimum, we were at 3200. Okay, and now I'll go back into not just flash duration. And by the way, on flash duration, we measure at T0.1, which is almost the full curve of the flash. That's what Broncolor thinks or feels. It is the best measurement ability for flash duration. So you might see numbers out there that are higher on T5. We go up to 1/10,000th of a second. Broncolor is well known, industry worldwide, for fast flash durations in food photography, liquor, spills, water shots, splashes, you name it. We're really the king of that, and we are well known for it. And, a lot of people turn to us when they use that. So now I'll go into color temperature, and much like the flash duration, I have the ability to change that as well. Okay, so if I wanted to change this pack, and that's all 3 heads, by the way, to a minus 200K, it's going a lot warmer, I have the ability to do that. Select, dissipating, changing itself, not dissipating, resetting itself, and I'm still at optimum color temperature of minus 200K. Okay, I'll go back in, come into color temperature again, and I can add more by going there. So this is going to go a little bit bluer. So you always want to hit your select, come back out, page by page. I'm still at optimum, and I'm at 400K. So that's the way to change that. If you wanted to do that, if you don't want to have to use filters over your lights, or you might have one pack on your background and that background's going a little bit bluer than you want the foreground pack to be, you can change that by just going in there and changing that. And that's one of the great features about Broncolor, that we can do that. I'll reset it by pressing down for 2 seconds. On the reset button, I get a little beep. Okay. By the way, the reset button, if I held this down 10 seconds, that would reset the whole pack to its factory default. I'll show you that later when I get into the user button and a few more things. Okay, so that is color temperature and flash duration. There's a lot of other cool features. I'm going to show you the sequence right now. Select that. When I'm in sequence, I can go up to a sequence of 50 pulse flashes in a row, simultaneously. So I'll press the button here. If I just did 10 flashes, select that, or 10 strobes, come back out, press the test button. So that rate of fire is based on the recharge of the light itself. I'm going to go down to a very low power. Let it dissipate for a second. I apologize, but there's a reason why. So I'm going to press the button again. That's 10 flashes in a sequence, and it goes very fast because there's less of a recharge. I'm going to get a little tricky now and show you something else called interval. If I needed to keep this at a low power level, I'll just bring it up a little bit. Okay, a low power level, I needed more sequence of, let's say, 15. Okay, select that, get back out. Now I need a little bit more spacing in between each flash. I'm going to go to an interval. Okay, so now I want to take these 15 sequences, and you'll see that right there, and I need a little bit more space in between them. So let's say I need a ½ second in between each flash. You'd use the interval menu, come in here, scroll up to 0.500, hit select, so it locks it in, and I'm at ½ second in between each flash on the sequence. And it slowed it down. This can be used for sports and many other applications, dance photography, sports photography, something like that. There's a million different applications you could use for this. Now, I'll reset this. All right, so my interval is gone and my sequence has been reset. I'll come back in and show you what the delay is. And the delay is simply this. It's going to delay before it fires. Okay, so a little more than 1 second. I'll select that. Okay, and now it shows you down in the main menu. If you're ever unsure about something, always go back to the main menu by pressing the reset button once, and you'll see what's there. It says it's set for a delay right now. If you went into the menu and you went down to your delay, you'd see that it's 1.180 of a second. So 1 second and some change. So when I press the button, which I'm going to do right now, there's a 1 second plus delay. Pressing the button, fires. Pressing the button, waits a second, fires. Okay? I could do Mississippis on that, but I'm not going to. All right, so I'm going to reset the pack again. I haven't changed any of my power levels because I've only pressed the reset button down for 2 seconds. Okay. Let's come into the other menus, and some things are pretty self-explanatory. Free mask. I'm not going to demonstrate this today, but I'll just explain it a little bit. Free mask is a way to, used in maybe like e-commerce photography, where you need to do high volume photography, and you need to strip out the background, let's say like a white background on a product shoot. The camera is static, it's not moving. Your foreground lights are on one pack, and then your background lights are on another. You can tell this pack through free mask to shoot the first shot where both go off, and then on the second shot, let's say the foreground light does not go off. And that will give you a silhouette registered, camera's registered again, so 2 shots. It'll give you a silhouette on your second shot of the background light. Then you can bring it into Photoshop and use a clipping path or whatever you want to silhouette that background and drop in whatever background color you want, clean the background out, many things you can do. And this is a high production tool for like e-commerce photography or something like that. Okay, so we're not going to show you free mask today, but we're going to actually recommend you go to our Broncolor YouTube page, where we have a great video on free mask which shows you all the intricacies of it, and I recommend that you go there. It's a great video. Watch. Great tool to work. Auxiliary backup, this actually is off by default. I actually like to keep it on, and it's simply if the pack gets unplugged or you have a power drain in the studio, that when you plug this back in, all your settings will be on that one. Okay, charge time is pretty self-explanatory, slow or fast. A dimmer, if the model lights will dim as they power up, or excuse me, they'll dim as they power down, and they will get brighter as they power up. Cell sensitivity, based on that before, we talked about that. Studio setup, this is really important. This is where you're going to set up your studio address, and then you have 3 lamp addresses based on this. Broncolor offers 99 studio addresses and 40 different lamp addresses. Some people don't even bother with the lamp addresses, but if you wanted to use these in different groups, you can make different groups of and control them by grouping the lamp addresses as individual or as the same number, and then you can control them. I don't want to get too far into that, but I'll just show you how to work and show you the studio addresses. Let's say you're working in several studio bays that are side by side. You need one studio bay to be studio address 1, you need another one to be 2, another one to 3, 4, so forth and so on. I'll change this to under studio setup. I'll change this pack to number 2. And the studio address, I select it, I click it up to number 2, I select, now it's studio address number 2, come back out, go to my main menu, studio address 2, I haven't changed my lamp addresses, that's not a problem. And on my remote, and we're going to go over the remotes in depth later, but I will change my studio address to number 2, I set it, and test fire, and I'm good to go. Now I am on my remote, I'm on Studio 2, and on my pack, I'm Studio 2. Whenever you do the remote, you'll always want to have the pack on and ready to go, so when it syncs, it sees it properly. Okay, so I've shown you that there are 35 different menus on this here, and I want you to remember that for a second. There's a lot to it. There's the Wi-Fi, the lamp outlets, the model lights, sequence, color temperature, interval. Most of these you're not going to use. Some you'll get into deep in depth with. You could do things, you could even brighten up or dim this test button if you'd like. Flash control for IRRS. Yes. Control that and go into that. You could even turn the sound volume on the keys louder or... But what I'd like to show you is the memories in conjunction with using the user button. Okay? So the user button is very simple. I'm going to get out of that for a second. When I have the user button on, let's say I'm in the studio and I have a new photographer who's come in and he just happens to come from Germany, he doesn't speak English, or he doesn't speak or read English. I know, it's a little bit of a stretch. Hitting the user button, I've already set this pack up before into German, so if my friend or my studio partner who doesn't speak English can work with this. And there's several different languages that you can pick from in the setting, and just by hitting the user button and that light is on, he can now work with it in his native language, and that's great. Okay, so put that on. Now if I needed to get rid of that and go back to English, I'd have to hold the reset button down for 10 seconds. I'm not going to do that right now, but you'd have to hold the reset button down for 10 seconds while this user button is on, and vice versa. If I needed to reset this and go while the user button is not on, I would be resetting at its default as well. Okay, so to add to that, I'm going to go to the memories, and there are 4 memory settings that we can have for each user setting. So let's say you have one setup on one set, and you can plug that into memory number 1, select, store, recall, and that could be, in fact this shows what the last one was. These are at level 5. I'll just actually recall it, and you'll see these power levels change. Recall the memory data, yes, and there I go. So if that was a set that you had up for a certain type of shoot that you redo and you have to come back and rebuild, you can leave that set. Memory 2 would be something different. Maybe it's not a little different, but I'll quit and get out of there. Maybe memory 3 could be reset for something else, and you get the picture here. If you go into your user button, he has the same ability. I think it's I'm not even going to try to pronounce that. That's a memory in German right there, so he can set it, or the user button. Okay. Now, let me show you the reset button completely. If I held this down past the 2 seconds, and that beep, keep holding it down for 10 seconds, it's going to reset this pack to its factory default for the country of origin it's at. I'm back to English in the user mode. I've also gone to Studio One. On my non-user button, or my default menu, I'm back to Studio 2 where I set. If I were to hold this down for the 10 seconds, you would go back to Studio 1. And I'm going to just demonstrate that right now. Okay, cool. Now, I'm going to show you something that I don't like to show you, but I'm going to show it to you anyway, because there's so many features in the Broncolor pack that are available to you. And if this is just too confusing to have 35 different menus, actually it's 36 different menus, and you just don't need them. If you want to simplify everything, there is a way to go to what's called the easy mode. So I'm just going to scroll through these menus just to show you the difference. Okay, 7 pages. It's actually 35, my mistake. So 35 different menus. And if I just want a simple set of menus on this, just hold the user button down for 5 seconds. 1 Mississippi, 2, 3, 4, 5. And at the bottom, you're going to see easy mode. Select that, go on, select it to be on. Then, this is the tricky part, you have to turn the pack completely off, and then turn the pack on again. Okay. Okay, and in the menu, it's now model light, sequence, studio address, charge time. So that's it. You don't have all those other things that you might not use, like the delay, the interval. They're just not there. Free mask is not there. You're not using it, it's not available. It's still available. You can get back out of this, but it's just not available in this what's called easy mode. So if you are so inclined and you want to make your life simple, that is a way to do it. And then to get back out of it, you basically have to hold the button down again, 5 seconds. You'll see it at the very bottom. Select this and come out of it. And let's just check one thing before I get out of this. Okay, so I'm out of it now, and it's off. Okay, we're back to the 35 different menus now that are available in the default mode. Easy mode is turned off.
All right, and so welcome back. That was our first portion of our video segments today. Thanks again, Francis, for helping us put that all together, and definitely this isn't going to be the last one. We've got a bit more going out there. We did have a question that came through during the Q&A section. Francis, does the 1600S have the same control like the 3200? Specifically bringing it down to 0.01 watt-seconds or joules on the pack?
Actually, no. It only goes down to, I believe, 1.0. So on the 1600S. So because there's a stop difference, is what I've been told from ORS. So.
Okay. Before we roll into our next segment here, were there any other questions that came through? Not seeing anything yet. So let's go ahead. We'll roll into the second of our portions today. This one's going to be a lot shorter for us. We're going to be covering some more of the various heads to go with our packs.
In this segment, let's talk about the Broncolor lamp heads, or flash heads as we call them. The Pulsog G is the old standby. We've had this design for quite a while. And I'm going to actually take this reflector off. This is a P70 reflector. I'm going to pull back on this releasing mechanism at 12 o'clock on the head. I'm going to turn it and just pull that bayonet mount off. Okay, and put that down. The feature about the Pulsog G, and it's a little bit larger than its counterpart, the Unilight, is that it has this movable focusing feature that allows the flash tube, the exposed flash tube, to focus in or spot. And when working with, let's say, a hard metal reflector like this P70, you're going to be able to spot or flood the light. I'm going to actually put it back on and just show you. Okay, and can you see that? Okay, in and out, and that makes a nice spread or spot of the light. Okay, now that's the Pulsog G. The Unilight is very similar, however, it's got less real estate. It does not have the focusing device on this, so you wouldn't use this if you needed to spot with a hard metal reflector like the P70, which I just showed you. I'll take this off, just put it down for a second. And it costs less, and it's just used maybe when you use it for a softbox with our Broncolor speed ring. You wouldn't need to focus this back and forth anymore. So having this a little bit lighter, a little bit smaller in real estate, if this was on a still life setup, you'd have the ability to put more in where others couldn't fit. So I'll take the speed ring off and I'll show you other couple features. So our heads have tubes in them that are either 1600 or 3200 watt seconds. This happens to be a 3200 watt second tube. It uses a cover dome that protects the tube in case it breaks or blows, or the model light bursts. And that will protect you if there's any kind of mishap or anything like that, but there usually isn't. The cover dome is the same on the Pulsog G and the Unilight. And if it's the same flash tube at the same size, they are interchangeable as well, 3200 to 1600. The only thing I'll ask is that when you have a head, and this happens to be the Pico, that has a 1600 watt indicator on either the head itself or the plug, is that you don't bring the power level on a 3200 pack up to 10, which is 3200 watt seconds, that you only want to bring that to 9, which would be a 1600 watt second level. The head is not going to blow up, it's not going to burst or anything like that, but continued usage at that level will wear the tube down prematurely. So you just want to be aware of that if you happen to get a head that's 1600 watt seconds. And we'll talk about the Pico in just a minute because that is a 1600 watt second head. So the Pulsog and the Unilight use the same cover dome, and they take the same tubes. I'm going to show you how to take the cover dome off, and what you want to do is twist the cover dome until at 12 o'clock you see this black line. Hopefully you can see that in the video. You bring that to 12 o'clock and then you just very carefully wiggle that out. Okay, and that's the black line, and that is the 12 o'clock indicator. And you can always tell because that's the release tube, the release mechanism on the bayonet mount. Okay, so while I'm here, why don't I show you how to change out the flash tube and the model light. Let's start with the model light. Now, first thing you want to do is, and I didn't do this, so shame on me, is I want to unplug my pack completely. You could always do that as well, but I don't want any electricity going through this when I'm doing that. And I'm going to take out my model light first. Model lights are very sensitive. Like any halogen bulb, you want to use a protector like a cloth or a tissue here, and just grab it and wiggle it out and take the 2 pins out of the receptor, the socket. Okay? And I'll leave that out for a second. And then on the flash tube, you're going to grab it mostly by the porcelain indicator, but I like to use a piece of tissue or something just to protect it as well, in case my fingers touch the flash tube. It's not good to get the oils from your fingers or your hands onto the flash tube. It gets hot and it'll burn. And that's simply wiggling that out. That's simply wiggling that out and getting the 3 pins out of the socket that's deep in there. Okay? Put it back in. It's completely reversed, but I want to indicate or show you the indicator here. There's a small little spring clip, and that goes into this little canyon right here, this little insert. You want to take the flash tube and take these 3 pins into that 3-pin socket receptor and just fit it in and very carefully push it down. That's why I'm using the tissue, but I'm touching it mostly from the porcelain connector. And I just want to make sure that that spring clip that I pointed out before goes into that little indent. And it did. Then I will grab my model light and very carefully, again, this head is unplugged. There is no power going to it whatsoever. And then I'll just insert my model light, the 2-pin connector. Then you take your cover dome, your black line at 12 o'clock, put it in, give it a small turn, and pull on it. Good. The cover dome is okay to touch by your bare fingers, but I always like to give it a little wipe to take the oil off. Now, just want to point something out. On certain metal reflectors, and we'll show you this when we talk about those, you might have a dome that is frosted. So if you had to change that and change only the dome, you could take the frosted dome for certain optical spots and hard metal reflectors like the PAR. You can put that on, and there you go. So any of the reflectors or the optical spots that that need this dome, such as the PAR reflector or the optical spot attachment that we make, will come with this dome attached or included, and you will need to swap them out from the clear dome to the matte dome. So one more thing I'd like to show you is that the model light that I showed you before does have a fuse that goes into this socket right here. You would take a flat screwdriver, turn that, of course, do this when it's unplugged, and then use only the proper fuse that goes with each of the lamp heads. They are slightly different. So let's talk about the Pico Lights. They're actually one of my favorite Broncolor lamp heads and accessory systems. It's a smaller head than the Pulsog or the Unilight. I like to call it a little bit of a soda can. It's almost, the body of it is really not much bigger than a soda can. And they have an omega tube that's recessed in there, so a little bit different than our Pulsog or our Unilight with the exposed flash tube. And they are designed for tight little situations like jewelry photography or product photography that you don't have a lot of real estate to get many different light modifiers in. So imagine this where I had maybe 4 or 5 of these on a very small subject. I can get these in very, very close. What makes the Pico Light really special is the Pico Light modifiers. And we have the Pico Box, the Pico Fresnel. Those are the barn doors. This is the Pico Snoot. And this back here is the Optical Spot, the Pico Optical Spot. Fantastic little system that really, really makes shooting like product or small objects just amazing. People who use these are absolute fanatics about them. And let's just demonstrate a few things. The Pico Light is essentially a 1600 watt flash tube. It's got a smaller little cable if you look at the thickness than the Unilight or the Pulsog. So be careful with this. If you use this on a 3200 watt second head and you're only using one Pico light, you don't want to go above power level 10, which again is 3200 watt seconds. You're not going to blow the tube up, you're not going to hurt it in essence, the light itself, but you will wear the tube down prematurely, so please be aware of that. Only 1600 watt seconds, and it says it on the actual plug for the receptor. Okay. So again, the Pico is really complemented by its Pico accessories. And they're very, very simple to assemble. There are two little inserts along these two rails. So there's two little inserts, and the accessories have these little cuts in the body of them. And then they have a clip here to hold them down. On the Pico Box, there's one other added thing, because you don't want this thing falling off. You have a little release tab here, that when you take this off, you'll use that. So, I'm going to actually insert this. Let me get this to the camera. And I'm going to plop that in. I'm going to insert that in, bring it down to the rails, and that metal rail will go into that insert, and it's got to go in on both sides. So you might have to finesse it around a little bit, and then you have the ability to turn it, and it's going to stop on those degrees right there. Then, when you get it to the position you want it, you lock it down with this clamp. It's just a spring clamp. Comes up. Once it's down, you're not going to be able to turn the actual lamp head inside the Pico Box. Okay. Why the Pico Box? Ooh, a little piece of dirt there. Why the Pico Box? Because instead of like a larger soft box, number one, it's the real estate. If I need to get this in very close to my subject, I've got this right there, and I can get other lights around it. Let's say I needed to light up a cosmetic product, and it's just the undername of the logo, and I needed to put another light for that on the snoot. I could put that light right here. I'm just giving a simple scenario there. The other thing great about the Pico Box is it's a plexi box that's got a very hard, sharp line to it. So if you're shooting a mirror type object or a very reflective object, this is going to reflect in a very sharp line. Try that with a softbox, you're not going to get that. When you look at it in detail, you're going to get a waviness out of the softbox from the material itself. That's just not going to be, acceptable by your client that you're shooting these high-end cosmetics for. So this will give you a really sharp line, and that's what photographers really love about the Pico Box. Now, next, so I'm going to put the Pico Box down, and I'm going to take the Pico Optical Spot. The Optical Spot is just that. I'm going to take it off, undo the clamp, move to the rail insert openings, and just take it right out. Okay? So, with the Optical Spot, you want to make sure that you're using the Fresnel glass that's in here, the matte glass, excuse me. I called it Fresnel glass, that's a mistake. Let me start again. So, when you use the Optical Spot or the Fresnel, because that's going to show you the shape of the glass itself, you want to make sure that you're using the frosted glass here, and it simply comes out via this little clip. And you can change it out. Here's the clear glass, here's the frosted glass. I'll put the frosted glass back in. There's 3 tabs where it sits on. Insert it, make sure it's seated properly. Squeeze the little locking tab. Sometimes, and just get it in the insert. Sometimes it just has to go there like that. And you'll see that it fits in properly. Okay, then put the Optical Spot back on. Line it up to the tabs, both sides. spin it, lock it in place. It's got 4 blades, and then it has a section where gobos can go in there, so you can put a design in there. And you can then focus with the light up here. Okay? All right. And again, small real estate. If I had the Pico Box up and the Optical Spot in there, I'm not using a lot of real estate. If you had to get in and clean the jewelry or something like that, you'd have the ability to do that. So I'll put this back. I'll take off the Pico Box, releasing the clamp, and on the Pico Box there's this little locking device. Hope everybody can see that. Without it, it's going to stop, and then I take that out and I can put that down. The Fresnel would go on here like this. Now with the Fresnel, I'm going to actually stop on the Fresnel, and I'm going to put the Pico Snoot on. The Pico Snoot has several devices in it. It's got 3 honeycomb-sized grids and 2 apertures, plus this large spring. I like to put the aperture in first, although there's no exact way you have to do it. But I like to put it in there and put that in. And then the spring is slightly tapered, you can tell, slightly thinner at this point than it is at this point. I like to put the tapered in first, push it down until it kind of sits itself right there on that nylon bushing. And then again, put it in and line it up with these alignment tabs, lock it down in place, and your snoot is ready to go. Okay. Simple barn doors that works on the and then last is a Pulsog adapter. Now, if you were in a studio and you just happened to run out of heads, the Pulsog and the Unilight heads, and you had a Pico light there, and you needed to put a softbox on or a hard metal reflector, this goes on here, locks down, insert the tabs so it locks in, and then with the bayonet mount that's now available for the Pico light, you can improvise and get a softbox on here or a hard metal reflector that you would use there. So if I'm going to use the Fresnel, I'm going to want to make sure that I'm going to use the frosted dome glass, which is what I showed you just before. Because if you don't use that, it's going to give you a hot spot in the middle. It's going to look a little ugly because it's going to reflect or mimic the shape of the actual light source. So that's why it's a dome frosted dome or frosted front cover glass. I call it a dome, but it's really frosted cover. Then the Fresnel has the ability to focus back and forth. I've used this for portraits and beauty. It's really nice when you work with this. So those are the Pico lights. In a small situation or a tight situation, you've got the ability to use these very nicely. And I guarantee you, if you start using them, you're going to love them.
All right, so that was our second video segment here, and this time we actually do have a couple of questions and would like to go ahead and get those going. Let's start with something a little bit easier. We kind of covered it at the end there, but Francis, why would you want to use a clear glass, either that the front cover or a dome, versus the frosted?
Well, for some of the special modifiers that we have, such as the optical spot, when you use an optical spot or the Fresnel, you're actually magnifying the actual light source. So remember that the flash tube is essentially an omega tube. The shape of it is an omega shape. When you use a frosted glass, the shape now is the frosted glass or the frosted dome. So it's larger, it's bigger, and that's the shape that's going to be projected through the Fresnel or through the optical spot. If you don't, you're going to end up with an actual projection, like if you use the optical spot, of the omega tube, and it's just going to be very uneven, and that's probably not what you want for lighting up a cosmetic or a spot. You could use the optical spot on a portrait or a beauty setup. It's actually very beautiful, especially using the Fresnel. We've done it in the past. So if you didn't use the frosted front glass or the frosted dome, you're going to have this kind of ugly shape. It's just not pretty. So always best when you use what's required with the optical spot or the Fresnel is to use do what they recommend and use the frosted, the matte dome, we call it, M-A-T. So.
Okay. And then Will in the chat asked, doesn't the Scoro have the ability to detect what type of lamp head is connected and limit the power output?
The simple answer is no. The complex answer, which I have to say that I don't have enough background on, is that I believe that some of our older packs and some of their older heads did this. I'm still looking into that. And I had a conversation with one of our dealers recently about this, who's been in the game for a long time with Broncolor. Remember, Broncolor's been around 60 years. I believe that some of the old A2 graphites and the heads did that, some of the legacy stuff. But right now, no. You could plug in a 1600 watt head, and unfortunately, you could push through 3200 watt seconds out of it. And that's why we caution you to do this, to take caution when you have a 1600 watt tube. You just don't want to put through more power than is actually required for it. So,
okay. And then
let me add to that, actually, Blake. Again, you're not going to blow up the tube if you put too much power through it. You're just going to wear it down faster than normal. So, but I've seen these tubes really go quite a remarkable number of flashes out of some of them. I have some studios that really push the limits on them, and the numbers are way up there. I'm not going to say any numbers right now, but they're quite remarkable what you can get out of one of these tubes.
Okay, perfect. And then a question that came through in our main chat portion that I actually think I may have answered incorrectly. So I want to bring it to you, Francis, and we'll talk about it here for a moment. Okay. Are the Broncolor flash tubes UV coated for film shooters?
Yes, they are. I believe in the past, again, this is a legacy question that I could do a little bit more research. I believe that we used to have clear domes that were non-UV coated. And we'd have to get a little bit more of an answer from the Swiss on why they were, why only offered right now for UV coated, which will bring it to 5600 Kelvin.
Okay. And I know that that there are some questions that come up with that as well. I did a little bit of looking, and I do see where some of our legacy domes are being advertised as having UV protection. Our soft light reflector has a UV protective glass in it. So definitely, I think we will need to do a little bit more researching and get back to everyone on that. A little bit later in the series, we do talk about our UV attachment, which actually does the opposite and only lets UV light through. That's going to be a little bit of a fun piece a little bit later. And then finally, before we get into our last portion here, unless there are any other question, Adrian in the chat says, I just blew up a insert name light here, but I've never blown up a Broncolor. So we definitely like the feedback there. So
safety is one of Broncolor's utmost concerns. So I can't emphasize that enough. The Swiss are all about having these packs work for you in a safe, absolute safe manner. So I always feel that that's the number one concern that Broncolor is putting out there, to put this equipment in your hands. They want you to be very comfortable with it.
Absolutely. And I can certainly say that, coming into this, I had very little experience with pack and head systems, and now I feel infinitely more comfortable after having worked around them and getting things together. So definitely, if you have not tried one before, I highly recommend it. So we're going to move now, since it looks like there's no more questions, we're going to move now into our final video segment for the afternoon. Of course, we've talked about our Scoro packs, but we seem to have left a little something off the table. So let's go ahead and we'll talk about what we've got through there. So we'll go ahead and we'll roll that video and keep things going.
So let's talk about the Broncolor Move 1200L battery pack. It's a battery pack that has 2 lamp outlets on it, and it's 1200 watt seconds, or 1200 joules. Portable, it's small, it's light, really can go anywhere, and it has these mobile LED heads that have a LED model light in them. So you can bring this on location, use it with battery, and have a model light available. So there's some nice features about this. The one thing I'd like to point out is it's not a Wi-Fi pack like our Scoro, but it does have the HS feature like our Cirrus model lights do. So you can use this with HS on location and shoot up to speeds of 0.008 of a second using the RFS 2.2 remote, which is designated for per camera of Sony, Canon, Nikon, or Fuji. I'll get into that a little bit later. If you want to use the HS mode, or you can use it with one of the regular RFS 2.1 transmitters. So it's RFS 2. Okay, so what's nice about the Move pack is that from a single battery, you can get 170 full flashes out of this. And that's, again, you have 2 outlets, so you can use 2 lamps. Let's go over the heads first. So the mobile LED heads, built pretty much specifically for this Move pack, they're rated actually at 1600 watt seconds, and taking off this little special reflector, again at 12 o'clock using the bayonet mount. It has an exposed flash tube, so using this in a para or another reflector is nice because of the exposed flash tube. And that little model light in there, so turning on the model light, you're not going to drain the power out of the battery via using the model light, because it's LED and it's going to use less power. Okay, it went off because it's on a timer, and I'll set that in just a minute. Okay, so why don't I do that right now? The model light can be set to a timer, and it's on 10 seconds right now. That's what its default was. And if I brought that up to 10, 30, 60, or continuous, now the model light would not go off until I actually turned it off again. And the model light also has the head, like all the other heads, has a switch on the head itself for the model light. Okay. So let's go into some features of the pack itself. Now, I just demonstrated the mobile LED head with this using the model light. That's the LED model light built into that head. This is the same connector as our Pulso and Unilight and Pico heads. You can use those heads in this Move 1200L pack, but you're not going to have the ability to use the model light that's available in those heads from the Move pack. So just keep that in mind. You can use the power, but you can't use the model light. Vice versa, if I were to take this, unplug this head, I could plug it into my Scoro pack and use it. However, the model light is not going to work. So the model light is specific on this head to this pack. Okay. All right. So, like on the Scoro pack, you can indicate on channel 1 and channel 2 how much power you'd like to adjust via these indicators. Pressing down once gives you a 1/10 stop power level increase, and on the master the same thing, or holding down can give you a full stop instrument. If I turn off channel 2, I can actually bring this up to its full power level 10, and it goes down to power level 2. So from 2 to 10 is your power range. And if I had this one on, I can actually go up altogether with this on. Now, I'd like to show you something. Since there is a speed button, and I'll turn this off. Since there is a speed button, when you press the speed button, like on the Scoro, you're going to have a sacrifice of power. On the Scoro, it's only half stop, but on the Move Pack, you would have a full stop sacrifice. You cannot go above power level 9. So just keep that in mind when you have the speed button on. Again, use the speed button. You're going to want to do another color balance, as you're going to add a little bit of blue to the mix in here. All right, so I'll turn that back on, bring that down. Let's go to level 6. Okay, so evened it out. Let's go into the menu and play around. Well, before I go to the menu, this is the on-off switch. Pressing it on. The sync is either RFS or cell. Right here, I'm not going to move the pack, I'll show you a little bit later, but right here there is a plug for a manual sync cord if you need it. Model light on or off. Eco switch, let's talk about it at the end. And then let's go into the menu. So if I press the menu button, I can come into the model light, which once I go into there, I can go into a timed model light, so I'm not wasting the battery. I think I talked about this already. So when I go into the model light, I can go into a timed of 10 seconds, 30, 60, or continuous, so I don't utilize the battery power. It has sequence. I'm so sorry. And you can go up to 1 to 50 sequences. Okay. And I'll turn that off. Back off. Okay. Flash duration. On this, it's only adjustable via your minimum or your optimum. So if I was on my minimum right now, I would be at my minimum flash duration, which is 75/100th of a second for each one of these heads coming out right now. Go into there and press down. Audio ready signal on, it's pretty self-explanatory. Studio address 1, this is where you'd set that. And then you can do your lamp addresses. Lamp 1, you'd set your address, and lamp 2, you'd set your address on that if you so wish to do so. And then you have your HS feature control right here, on or off. Again, you'd have to use your RFS 2.2 remote for HS. So let me show you two things on this, in that the plugs are the same as I showed you before, and always come in on an angle and click down. Then the battery is indicated here, and there's a release switch here, and this is where the battery goes in and gets inserted. I like to go put it in and it clicks. Okay, there is a charger port right there, and you can trickle charge this while the unit is on. However, it's only going to do so much. Don't expect it to charge up the battery so much while you're shooting. You'll get 170 full flashes out of this, and it'll be trickle charging when you're working with that. The charge time on this, the general rule of thumb, is 90% at 90 minutes. And that is the 3.5 millimeter socket for the manual sync cord as well. Okay. And I'd like to point out that there is an eco mode that you can put this in. It will keep the battery cooler. It will also recharge slower, and you are able to get more flashes out of this per battery charge. But it will be slower. There's a sacrifice. One other thing with the Move 1200L is that it comes with this fancy little soft pack that you can actually, it's got a vent for the fan vent here, and it's got a small trap door for the plugs. You can put this in, and if your assistant on location would like to put it on their shoulder, hold a light on a boom, you can make it easy portability doing that.
All right, perfect. So thanks again for everything and joining us here. That was the last of our sessions that we had pre-recorded for us. Have a couple of more additional questions in the chat, and I think that we can let everyone get on with their afternoon. First off, let's start with Adrian in the chat. Will turning on the modeling light from a pulso head damage a pack or vice versa when using a Mobi LED on a Scoro? I think what they're asking is if you're trying to use one of the different heads with another pack, is there any risk at damage?
Nope. It just won't work. So if you plug a mobile LED light into a Scoro pack, there's just two things you need to consider. But to answer the question, the model light just will not work. It's an LED model light that has different voltage that is designed only to work with the Move 1200L pack. But it will flash. I would also like to point out that head, the mobile LED head, has a tube that's rated at 1600 watt seconds. So like the Pico light, you don't want to bring that to a higher level than 1600 watt seconds, only because you'll wear the tube out. But and then vice versa, if you were to plug in a pulso head into your Move 1200L pack and you try to turn the model light on, it's just not going to work. It's just not going to, but there's nothing else is going to happen or anything like that if that's what anybody's worried about. So.
Okay, perfect. And then finally, there was a question as well about a port that was on the Scoro packs, a COM port. This port is actually a legacy port that is mostly used today by our service department. As an end user, it's definitely not something I would worry about. Just leave it out. If you do need to sync the pack manually using a sync cable, go ahead and use that sync port as well. And I think that's just about it for the day. We've got a question that doesn't quite match what we were talking about today, but Stephen in the chat asked, what stands are recommended for the Para 133? That's a great question, and that's going to be something that we cover a little bit in a couple of months here through our process. But while we're here, Francis, what are your recommendations? What do you think for the one?
I love a Kupo medium roller, and you can take out the lock knob out of that and use the larger receiver and just drop it into the I think they call it the baby drop, 1 1/8. No, I think it's 5/8. My math is going a little crazy, but it's the larger receiver that would drop in instead of putting the 5/8 receiver onto top of a C stand or something like that.
Yep, I'm going to agree with this one. The 133 is usable on a C stand. I've done it in the past, but definitely for that little bit of extra protection, probably go with something a little bit heavier duty.
Yeah, and having it on wheels is also a nice thing, Blake. You know, you can roll it around, you can lock it in, bring it down in the angle that you need. Yeah, a small medium roller stand is a nice way to do it.
Okay, perfect. Well, we'll let the chat see if there's any other questions that come up before we take this into a landing here. But as always, thank you for joining us, Francis. Thank you so much for joining us and giving us all of your wonderful wealth of knowledge today. For everyone who is attending, our next webinar will be next month. And on that, I believe we're going to be covering the RFS 2.1 and 2.2 remotes, as well as the Ceros heads as well. And again, if you are in the Los Angeles area on July 16th, make sure you go to broncolor.us/upcoming-events and sign up for your spot to take this training live and in person. And once again, a little bit later in the year and in the fall, we'll be doing some more events on the East Coast. We kind of ping pong back and forth, but the best way to find out where we're going to be is to keep your eye on that upcoming event page, as well as join our newsletter at broncolor.us. So without further ado, thank you all. Have a wonderful rest of your day and a wonderful Broncolor afternoon. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.